Thanks for watching our new internet broadcast of Nightline, now entering its second week. I'm Martin Bashir. We'll have a special preview of Monday night's television broadcast of Nightline later in the webcast. But we begin with one of the most gripping survival stories we can remember, now being told in remarkable new detail by a survivor who cannot forget the horror of more than 30 years ago. Indeed, Nightline has teamed up with Outside magazine in an exclusive interview with one of the survivors of that 1972 plane crash in the Andes that inspired the best-selling book and movie Alive. This is the story of Nando Parrado.
Let's say that I could close here, this room, put the temperature to minus 30 degrees below zero, no lights, nothing. And let's wait, there's nothing to eat. Who would die first? You? Or him? Or Luke? Who would die first?
High school students on the outskirts of Dallas are receiving some unusual instruction today, a lesson in life and death.
Everything changed. No more cars, no more high school, no more school, no more friends, no more home, no more hamburgers, nothing. You're going to die in 3 days. Your mind changes like that, no?
It's a message of heroism and horror that's riveted audiences for more than 30 years. Countless articles, documentaries, as well as feature films have tried to recreate this miracle of the Andes. And finally, Nando Parrado, one of the survivors, has written a memoir.
I think that the influence of my father was very big in my life, especially because he was a good father, a good friend, and a person with a great common sense. One of the things he taught me is that when you are at the end of your strength, when you think you can't give anything more from your body, from your commitment to the sport, there is always something left.
And although unconnected, he was learning the same thing from his teachers at school.
Character is something that it's built into your essence as a human being. He said, you will face tough things in life and you'll have to face them in the future. So they thought that building character was more important than building intellect.
These practical lessons in strength and sacrifice were regularly applied, particularly on the rugby field.
You really take care of your teammate in a way that it's different in other sports. When you fall in the ground in rugby, you're grass, the other team can crawl all over you.
Stamp on you,
and the other guys protect you a lot. They take you out of their way or they throw their bodies over you so they can protect you.
Friday the 13th of October 1972, Nando was 22 years old when his father dropped him at the international airport in Uruguay. He was going on a rugby tour to Chile. The family was so close, his mother and sister decided to go with him. Their course would take them across the Andes Mountains and down into Chile. The weather conditions were poor.
From the moment I realized that there was something really wrong till the moment of impact, not more than 10 seconds elapsed. So it's very fast. And I looked through the window and about 25, 30 yards away from the tip of the wing, I saw this black and white wall rushing by at the speed of the airplane, mixed with clouds, And that took me 3 or 4 seconds to analyze. My brain then says, a plane cannot fly that close to a mountain. And then I tried to look inside the airplane to see where my mother and my sister were. And then that was the moment of impact. So I think that 8-10 seconds elapsed since the moment I realized there was something wrong, till the moment of impact.
What happens next?
The instant of the impact is blindingly fast. I mean, this is the only plane crash in history. I think that there are survivors when a plane crashes at cruising speed and at cruising altitude.
The plane had crashed directly into one of the mountain peaks at roughly 14,000 feet.
I remember in 1 second the roof of the airplane opening in 1 millisecond over my head, and then it was a blackout for me completely. I was knocked out for 3.5 days. I don't remember anything else.
Nando was knocked unconscious, but at least he was alive. 16 of the plane's passengers were killed on impact. It was the modern equivalent of a biblical prophecy. The wreckage of an aircraft strewn across a glacier where temperatures reached -30 in the darkness.
These guys had already been 3.5 days, almost 4 days, immersed in this drama, in this ordeal. And they had learned in 3 or 4 days to survive, to be in the middle of that shock, of that. And they were very blunt. They didn't put things very tenderly to me or very gently.
What did they say?
They said, "Your mother is dead." Just like that, you know? And where is my sister? And your sister is wounded. She's lying there in the front of the fuselage.
What condition was she in?
She couldn't speak. She could only look, and I think she tried to tell a lot of things with her eyes, but she obviously had internal injuries and was suffering a lot from the cold and these injuries, and she died 2 days later.
In the first few days, their hopes were lifted by the sound of helicopters in the distance, but they never came close enough. And then, in the darkness one night, another cruel blow. An avalanche raced through the fuselage of the crashed plane, an experience much worse than that portrayed in the movie Alive.
You saw the avalanche made in the movie, and the only difference with that is that here you could see they had lighters. That was a decision of the director of the film, because they say, I cannot shoot a black screen. We didn't have absolutely no light whatsoever.
But yet again, those who were still alive proved to be incredibly resilient. Let's talk for a moment about the physical survival. I'm assuming that after about 8 days, any food that was left on the aircraft had been eaten. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. Everything that was edible, that was eatable on that airplane was eaten by the 8th day. And we were 29 boys alive at that time. And all the food we had were 2 chocolate tablets and half a box of chocolate-covered peanuts. How much can that last for 29 guys? 2 days, 2.5 days. Then there was absolutely nothing. And if you can imagine what a glacier at 14,000 feet is, there's nothing but ice and rocks. Nothing and nothing.
No vegetation.
Absolutely nothing.
Now, in order to live, the young men from the rugby team were forced into a terrible decision. Do they do the unthinkable, or do they die?
Your mind is not working at the same level as on civilization and a city. So it looks for solutions. Your mind is looking for solutions. And I was there lying at night, and suddenly this thought comes into my mind. The only thing we can eat is the dead bodies of our friends.
But when your mind starts to break down this taboo of eating human flesh, does your mind not also generate the thought of how repulsive it is?
When you're there, you're not the same person. You're surviving on instinct. All your primal thoughts come to you as an animal. You know, you're surviving on instinct. You have to survive. Repulsion is something that doesn't come to your head. Surviving does.
Their desperation for survival had turned them into cannibals. And how was the food, the flesh, presented to you?
In small strips, no, frozen. Everything is frozen there.
You and the remaining survivors are surviving on these bodies. But the next issue that arises is whether it's worth trekking out.
As soon as the radio on the 10th day finished announcing that the search has been abandoned, that we were doomed, that we were condemned to die on that glacier, I remember I looked to the west, to the mountains, and I knew at that moment I was going to fight against those mountains, because I didn't want to die there.
Left with no options, Nando made a decision to move forward. it was decided that teammate Roberto Canessa would be the ideal companion. In thin jeans and carrying a sock filled with human flesh as their only supply of food, they began navigating some of the most treacherous terrain on the earth.
We live in Montevideo at sea level, exactly at sea level. We live in front of the beach. So we were not used to big mountains or to snow or to ice. So we didn't know what we were going to face. We knew it was going to be tough, but we thought that it wouldn't be as tough.
What kept you going? Because you talk a lot about the recollection of your father in the book. Was he critical at this point?
I wanted to throw my energy across the wavelengths of the air and say, Daddy, I'm alive, I'm going to you, don't despair, I'm going to be there. And every step, every climb, every meter I climbed, I was closer to my father.
Tell us your reaction when you first saw some other human beings.
The instant I looked to my right and I saw a human being on a horse, that was the first spark of that I was going to live. I mean, up to that moment, all this history could have happened, and hadn't we seen that peasant, we would all have died. So the first glimpse of this peasant gave me the first glimpse of life. He was 10 hours away from civilization, so he had to go 10 hours down the valleys to get some help. So it took him one day to go down and up. Remember, this is 33 years ago. No cell phones, no 911s, deep southern corner of South America, deep inside the Andes Mountains. And when he comes back with a rescue party, that's when they realized whom we were. And they couldn't fathom the idea that we had crossed the Andes on foot, 45 miles on blue jeans, climbed over 18,000-foot mountains, and that we belonged to a plane that had crashed 2.5 months before. We survived 72 days and 72 nights with pieces of broken glass and a cigarette light.
A total of 16 men had defied everything. A catastrophic plane crash, starvation, freezing temperatures, even the loss of hope, and yet they survived.
I should be buried on a glacier.
After such an ordeal, it's perhaps unsurprising that Nando Parrado has built a successful business as a motivational speaker.
I ask myself, how did we do it?
And he also makes television programs with his wife that focus on their interests, from travel to motor racing. 2 months ago, having read their father's account, Nando's daughters insisted that they see the place that defined him. As you reflect on that extraordinary experience, what have you learned fundamentally?
Bad things happen in life. They are part of life. Lesson number 1. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Lesson number 2. Tell everybody you love them every day, because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. I've learned that in that frozen hell, the most important thing was the family. I've lost everything. I have lost my mother, my sister, my friends, all my money, my future. I was dead. I know what it is to have absolutely nothing.
What have you learned about endurance?
The limits of endurance are far greater than I thought a human being could have. And when you think you are tired, that's only the first step. We didn't want to be an example. We didn't want to be there. And nobody wants to suffer, but we have proved that life has to be lived, and you have to go forward and not look back because of bad things that happen.
Nando Parrado's remarkable story of staying alive. And now a quick look ahead at Monday night's television edition of Nightline. We visit the New Jersey gambling mecca of Atlantic City, which recently lost the Miss America pageant and now another indignity, in its view, from a new edition of the board game Monopoly. So why is Atlantic City so upset? That's on Monday's Nightline. And that's all for the weekend's internet edition of Nightline. Thank you for downloading us. I'm Martin Bashir. For Terry Moran, Cynthia McFadden, and all of us at ABC News, all the best for the rest of your day.